Good evening, good morning. Welcome to week 6 of PSSL 6240, Political Violence and Terrorism. I hope everyone got, let me actually start off with just some admin notes. Paper 2 is due Sunday. I'm taping this on Saturday, so it is due tomorrow by the due date, and I've gotten no messages or no mentions for excuses, so please get it done on the due date or get it done on Sunday night. At this point, I will not be accepting any excuses. Paper 3 is out there. It is week 8. It's due at the end of class along with the final, and it's on the week 8 section now. So if you want to get a read ahead for that, it might not be a bad idea. And then lastly, the Adobe Connect session is not this Thursday, but the following Thursday. And what I'm going to do at that one is just talk about the final. I go through the key points in preparation for the final, talk about the last paper, and then I want to kind of open it up to career fields in the national security field, in the intelligence community, and in the federal government. So we'll kind of have a good session there, but that is not this Thursday. It's the following Thursday in week 7. So welcome to week 6, and just to review week 5, I think we had a pretty good discussion on the discussion boards, starting with Professor Gora. I think there was some debate on what constitutes proportionality, what constitutes strong terrorism, or what are good policies followed by some countries, what are bad policies followed by others. One thing I want to correct, something he got wrong, was he gives the impression that we rounded up Muslims, we rounded up Arabs after 9/11, similar, and he compares it to the Japanese after during World War II. That is not true, and that's a little bit of a distortion. We did not round up Muslims in such a haphazard manner. At least it's certainly not on the scale that we rounded up Japanese Americans during the Second World War. What we did is we looked at people that were here of Arab or Muslim descent that were past their visa stays, on student visas, here as on travel visas. We certainly did not round up American citizens and imprison legitimate Arab Americans, Muslim Americans on a wide scale. So Professor Gora kind of went off a little bit on a tangent there, but otherwise the lecture was good and accurate. The one example I gave that I think this brings up some personal memories, especially when we talk about proportionality. And the question I asked a couple of students was, back in Iraq, for those of you who were in Iraq and Afghanistan, we used to, and it was almost a standard operating procedure, take a shot at vehicles that came too close to U.S. Humvees and U.S. MRAPs. We would take a shot for fear that they might be vehicle-borne IEDs. The question is that legitimate? And most people agree that you don't take a shot to kill someone, but if you took a shot to disable, you took a shot to tires, that was okay. Fortunately, oftentimes when you take a shot at a vehicle and you're in a moving Humvee, you can't make those distinctions between shooting in the cab of the vehicle or shooting at the tire or shooting at the non-lethal, using non-lethal methods. And I would, again, my personal opinion is that does violate Gora's proportionality rules. The threat wasn't as severe there. The mitigating circumstances were not proportional to what the threat could be. That would be an example where I think we didn't use proportionality of force, but feel free to disagree with me on that scenario. But that's a question I threw out there. And the one thing to take away with that, as well as the Byman article, are lessons learned from Israel. Israel stopped doing things like destroying houses of neighbors of people because they realized that it was ineffective. But that the wall was allowed or was a part of their strategy because that was effective. And I think that's something that certainly U.S. lessons learned. Trying to establish metrics for effectiveness against terrorism. We also talked about U.S. strategy. You saw the Van Aver article. We saw some key points. We discussed whether U.S. strategy was effective. And actually, as we get into these more fiscal constrained environment, whether it's actually cost effective. And that's certainly a point of debate. The one thing I think the most cost effective vehicle that seems to be approaching are these security assistance missions. We're not going to be invading Yemen, or we're not going to be invading Mali, or any of these other countries anytime soon. But sending small special forces teams with heavy ISR presence, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance presence, using civil affairs and other development assistance. Those are probably the way to defeat terrorism at its root cause, if you want to say that, or at least the way to mitigate Al Qaeda's strength as they burgeon into new territories. The one thing that was brought up this week was that there's been an announcement that drone strikes are going to be curtailed quite significantly in the AFPAC region. And for those of you who recall, back in earlier in 2013, Obama came up and he talked at the National Defense University, and he said it's a new phase in the war on terror. It's time to decrease the drone war, at least the drone wars without some sort of judicial review. One thing I want to say about that, it's a shrewd move. It makes you sound good, but it also coincides with the fact is there's not a lot of targets in the AFPAC region anymore. We killed a whole lot of them, and it's not like there's going to be drone strikes or there's a whole lot of targets that are proliferating that we can actually impact. So that's kind of came up from the current events from this past week. So that's week 5. Going on to week 6. Intelligence failures. Intelligence and counterterrorism is probably the best way to put it. We're going to talk about 9/11 intelligence failures, the failures around 9/11, or ask, is it an intelligence failure around 9/11? I'm not 100% convinced 9/11 is an intelligence failure, and we'll talk about that in a second. And then we'll go into some of the post 9/11 case studies. As a note, I sent a note out, the National Geographic 9/11 commemoration video, it's changed. Their YouTube link went bad. It shifted over to another YouTube link, and I sent that out in the announcement. So please use that link to watch that documentary. And on that note, this week there's a lot of documentaries. There's actually 3 documentaries. The National Geographic one I just sent on YouTube. The Nova Inside NSA, excellent documentary that is very relevant considering all the revelations about NSA that have happened. And then the third documentary is another excellent one, a BBC documentary on the Christmas Day underwear bomber and the failures surrounding, the intelligence failures surrounding that. All these documentaries are actually, not only are they educational, they're actually somewhat entertaining, so feel free to watch it with your spouse or with your kids. It's nothing's too detrimental on that respect, and they're all very, very well done documentaries. But as you're watching the documentaries, the one thing I want you to think of is, again, what are the intelligence failures? Where could our national security apparatus, whether it's Homeland Security or FBI or CIA, where could they have stopped a 9/11 attack? What were those crucial moments where action could have been taken? And that's what I'm going to ask you from here on in. Unfortunately, there's a lot of commissions whenever something happens, but the one thing you have to ask is, okay, if this action had been different, would it have led to a different outcome? If you're going to see on the 9/11, if that FBI agent's memo where he talked about Arabs flying, taking flight lessons, if that got to the FBI director, would there have been a different action? Would 9/11 have been stopped? If the 2 people in the Fort Hood shooter, if the FBI and the Joint Terrorism Task Force and the Department of Defense, if they talked, would it have stopped Fort Hood, and would it have made a difference? So think about those questions as you're reading through these documentaries, or reading through these papers and watching these documentaries. So we're going to we'll start off with 9/11. You read the 9/11 Commission report, at least that one chapter with the recommendations, and ask, are those recommendations, would they have stopped the 9/11? I'm not 100% sure convinced, but I'll let you go in detail on that. And then from 9/11, we go to post 9/11. So we talk DHS fusion centers. Are they good? Are they bad? Are they worth the cost? Are they worth the cost in civil liberties? Some people had commented it in the last week, and we're going to go in depth on that in this section. And then we're going to go into the Fort Hood shooting, which we touched on in week 2 when we talked about whether it's terrorism or not. What we're going to talk about this week is where were the intelligence failures? Why, who didn't talk to who, and would it have made a difference? And we're going to go in depth on that. And then we're going to go into the underwear bomber, or the Christmas Day bomber. Some of you probably remember that quite vividly, and talk about transportation security, terrorism databases, and why we couldn't stop that guy, or why the system failed on that day. And the one thing I don't have on the assignments list I'm going to send you is there's some pretty good articles that have come out on Boston. What were the intelligence failures on Boston, why we didn't catch the Tsarnaev brothers, and what we can do to prevent that. And I'm going to send those articles out this week. It wasn't part of your initial reading session, but I'll send those articles as soon as possible. So with that being said, I hope this is definitely a critical. I mean, all the sections are critical, but this is especially critical because I'm sure it probably pertains to your day-to-day job. And of course, the paper 3 deals a lot with this section. So if there's any questions or issues with this section, or with any other future or any other issues, please let me know.